help us, having it to see and listen to, remember and accept. I vow to taste the truth of the Taoist teachings. In Buddhism, when Zen practitioners share their understandings of the teachings and practice, it's offered on the basis of dana paramita. And dana is a Pali word that means generosity or to give freely. And this is done without the expectation of anything in return when the opportunity arises. And those who share the teachings at Great Tree do so on a dana basis. And you can support their practice by giving what you can. Our speaker today, Liliane, has a habit of donating her dana back to Great Tree, which is wonderful. So you can go to the Great Tree website and go to the upper right corner and hit the giving button. Our speaker today is Dr. Liliane Myoren Papin, who is a Franco-American writer and teacher of Chinese medicine, which she describes as an ecological medicine, particularly suited to our times. She practices and teaches acupuncture, herbology, qigong, and dietary therapy. Her books are The Treasures of Chinese Medicine for Today's World, The Great Book of Daoist Medicine, Immunity Special Edition, and Dare Sea Vegetables, Therapeutic and Culinary Uses of Sea Vegetables. And she spoke here a couple of weeks ago. She speaks kind of at the turn of every season to talk about how we should think of each month turning. And this is sort of a follow-up to her last talk, which was on kind of the seasons changing for fall. So the title of her talk today is Tending to Our Autumnal Grief and Sadness. So welcome, Liliane.
Thank you. It's impressive to see you in a row like this. And you're in session, right?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So, and there's somebody to your right, Tejo?
Yes.
Okay, I can't see. Okay, so as you recall, maybe last time, I mean, this talk was not planned, and but there were a few questions, and Genjo in particular had asked a couple of
donation.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, and I said, well, those were the questions I wanted to ask you. So today I have not really prepared, which is unusual for me. I thought I would go with the flow. Let me just give you an introduction to today, which is in Taoism. When we talk about season, there's an energy linked to it. And an energy, or many energies, but they all go in the same direction. So there's an energy that we need to understand and apply or feel or be aware of in our lives and in nature, because it's the same energy that is in nature, that is in our bodies. So, and each season is associated with a category of emotion. So for the fall, the emotion that's associated with it is said to be sadness, grief. Those are the emotions of the fall. So mostly when you talk to Chinese medicine practitioners nowadays, I think mostly they tend to see that as pathogens of the lung, because it's also the season of the lung, right? And that sadness can indeed hurt the lung. So we see that when people, lose someone or something they really cherish. And it's not unusual that in the weeks, in the months that follow, they develop a lung disease, pneumonia, or for some children, sometimes asthma. So it can indeed hurt the lung. We say that sadness and grief can hurt the lung and disperse energy, make you feel very tired. You know, your whole posture becomes curved and you inward. You don't have the strength to go toward the outside world. So indeed, it can be a pathogen. However, I think we need to go a bit further because it is also a good, quote unquote, good, bad, but it's also a necessary emotion that is a human emotion that has a lot to teach us. And so each season invites us to go into its heart. What is the heart of a season? What is its breath? What is it telling us? What is it teaching us? What is it opening us to? And so, indeed, sadness and grief are part of the long season of the fall. So I think I can't remember which one of you had asked. There were three questions. One was, why is the fall associated with lung? After all, it could be, why isn't it spring? Why isn't spring as in this tradition? Because there are various traditions and you don't find exactly the same thing in each. But in Taoism, certainly lung and large intestine are linked to the fall. So that was one question. Why is it that season that is linked to the lung? The other one was, why is lung energy associated to sadness? I think it was Genjo who asked that. I seem to remember. And the last one I asked you was, it is said also that dryness is the pathogen of the lung, so that the most hurtful or the strongest pathogen for the lung is dryness. And why is that? So we're going to come back to the first question, and I'd like you to share. I hope you have thought about it. Maybe you have not, but if you have, if you could share your thoughts about it. Why is it that fall is associated, fall season is associated with the lung and large intestine? Let's not forget the large intestine is part of the lung in that model, Daoist model. So why fall and the lung?
Well, it's one of the 5 Wuxing elements theory, and it's associated with metal.
Right? But the question is why? Why? So because this, and I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off like this. You know, I obviously, you know, but my question is to go to why. Why is it that way? Because I think we talked about the lung and the 5 energies, and I think here mostly everyone knows them at this point. But to go a bit further as to why. So
Letting go.
Hmm.
Letting go is at the heart of it.
Letting go is at the heart of it. Okay, so how do you see that associated to the lung?
Breath, energy, prana, chi, ki.
Okay. Breath, all right. Couldn't you say, I'm going to challenge you a bit, couldn't you say that spring would be more associated to the lung and to, you know, the inhalation? Taking a deep breath in spring would be more associated to the lung.
No, I don't think so, because of the causation. They're all linked. They all feed the next one and across. And I think it's the natural progression, the organic progression, if you will, And I think that is why it's situated in the fall or autumn season.
All right. All right. Anything else? Anybody else? Yes, go ahead.
The lung like cleans the blood and I feel like that idea of like taking in maybe something that's difficult and transforming it could be part of it. I'm not sure, but what it receives is blood that, or like it oxygenates it. So I feel like maybe that has to do with it, like kind of fall is like when things are like dying or something, and then it can regenerate. But I guess that's kind of spring too. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I was just thinking, does it have something to do maybe with how our bodies are changing from the summer?
Yeah. Can you develop a bit?
No. Sorry. I was just thinking, what I was kind of thinking is, what happens to my body in the summer? How does my body, how does it, what happens to it by the end of the summer? And then somehow I was thinking maybe that would, and then when Nana said about the lungs
Well,
cleansing.
actually, I said clean, but that's like the kidney, right? It's more like just adding oxygen.
Adding oxygen, the lungs.
To the blood.
Okay, sorry, I'm totally confused now.
Well, just to add another piece to the free association, I think like something that draws my attention to the breath in fall is like in like the summer and spring, it's like pretty, well, unless you have allergies, it's pretty easy to breathe, like the air is warm. But like in the fall, like I think of, in the mornings when it's cool and you breathe the air and it's kind of like sharp, like there's a sharpness in the air. And maybe even like the fact that people get fevers and colds in the fall, it's not as easy to breathe. So like it brings awareness to the breath or something.
Mm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think maybe I don't know why fall or why the lungs would be connected to fall, but I feel like the grief of fall and like when you cry a lot, your lungs are like going like expanding and contracting, I think, anyways, when
Okay.
you're like, crying.
I want to bring in ancestors into the conversation too. I don't know how they fit, but I'm thinking about kind of this time and this season across cultures and tradition. It's often said it's a period when the veil between, this physical world and maybe the spiritual world or the ancestral world is the thinnest. And then thinking about the breath and how the lungs are in some ways the most direct vehicle between the internal and the external. We constantly bringing in and bringing out things. I don't know exactly how all that fits together, but
Okay. Okay. I see a message from Linda who says she would like to offer another perspective. So can you speak, Linda?
Yes, good morning. So it's interesting having this conversation. What resonates with me is, and I feel like maybe it's veering a little bit off course, but it's still relevant nonetheless, is the concept of seasons to begin with is very mid-latitude based. And what I mean by that is if we, lived in a very far northern latitude up near the North Pole or vice versa, South Pole, or if we lived closer to the equator, that concept of seasons and that changing concept, while there are still changes that occur, it's significantly more subtle and looks a lot different than what we visualize it as being within this mid-latitude region. So in terms of fitting in with this long discussion, that's, I don't know, I think another layer or another piece that has crossed my mind.
Okay, okay. What is interesting in what you're saying is that without going too much into detail, when we talk about yin and yang, which is basically what seasons are, and when you say, you know, in the north or on the equator, in the Taoist traditions always said that you need to look at the point of perspective. Where are you looking from? So, and you're right about that. But for our purpose, today we're going to talk about, you know, the 5 energies as we know in our regions. But you're right, absolutely. Anything else?
Well, you know, I've been thinking about the dryness piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I have always kind of wondered, being from Minnesota where everything gets heated, and that's always why I thought I got more dry in the winter, but it happens here in North Carolina too. So it seems like maybe just from a physical point of view, if you get dry, it's going to make it more difficult for the lungs to function if they need moisture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. You know, when you look at it basically, even though they're divided, and that might come back to what Linda was saying, we have 2 big seasons, a yang season, which is, you know, spring and summer going up, and we have a yin season of fall and winter, you know, getting colder. So the way, you know, and you mentioned, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, when you spoke first.
Tokyo.
Tokyo?
Yeah.
So when you spoke first, you mentioned metal energy. And it's interesting that in the Taoist tradition, in some other tradition, it's not quite the same. They are, and for example, in some tradition, they do link the spring to the lung. So that's why I was asking you about that. But in this tradition, no. They look at, and for me personally, when I was asking myself that question, it was a day walking in the forest that it came to me why it was metal energy in the fall. Because when you walk in a forest, you notice 2 things mostly. Number 1 is, of course, the leaves changing and falling on one hand. The other thing that you notice is the smell that comes from the leaves, right? So I realized that in the fall, you have a double movement. You have the leaves coming down, and they get, of course, with time, they get more and more compact. So there's never a time when you have leaves up to the top of the tree. You know, every year it's absorbed in the soil and it becomes the next earth, the next humus. And so I realized that when the Taoists talk about metal energy, they look at that energy of compaction, of concentration, that makes him more and more compact on one hand and release air and oxygen on the other hand. So when we are in the forest, we notice that because the smells are so strong, and of course nose is part of the lung too. So there's, on one hand, you have the lighter elements, air and carbon, everything that's coming out, and oxygen. And on the other hand, you have matter becoming more and more dense. And I read once in a magazine about physics and nature that biophysicians talk about the earth as taking its first breath when it became very compact, and its exhalation, its expiration, creating the atmosphere that we breathe. So it's like that compaction releases the air in which we evolve around the earth. So that double movement is what they look at, and they look at, actually, they look more at the expiration, you know, the metal energy becoming more and more compact that releases the gases and air into the atmosphere. So that's one movement. And when we look at nature right now, what you might have heard, I thought of that because we have a tree that we want to plant, and the person who sold the tree said, well, come back in November to plant your tree, because November is the best time to plant the tree. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. You know, it goes with the same thing. So, because if you plant the tree in the fall, its roots are going to go deeper. It has that movement of going to search deeper, and it's going to be stronger in the spring. So if you look at nature right now, you could say that all of nature is taking a deep, deep breath and going down, down, down in its abdomen, just like we practiced last time, you know, abdominal breath, which is large intestine with the lung, right? So you can say that the whole of nature right now is taking a huge abdominal breath, going deep, 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 deep into its roots, into its center. So the surface is not irrigated anymore. The chlorophyll is not necessary, doesn't take light, of course. And so everything is going inside and downward deep, just like breathing, right? And when we look at that, we can see there's that double movement. No season has this double movement of the breath, of going deep, 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 deep inside, and at the same time breathing out and releasing the leaves, you know, letting go of everything. So by nature, the fall has this double aspect of breathing in deep and letting go. And of course, the aspect of letting go is especially the large intestine. And as we know, we do breathe in our belly. And when we look at a baby, it's pretty obvious that breathing in, breathing out in the belly. As we get older, we tend to breathe more from the chest or being more blocked and forgetting to breathe in the abdomen. So right now, that's what nature is doing, breathing into its abdomen and releasing its leaves and releasing all that is green, almost all that is green. So has that double movement. So it's interesting to see also that in the old days, in the Celtic tradition, that comes back a bit to what Genjo was saying, in the Celtic tradition, the fall and Halloween and All Saints' Day was the beginning of the year. When all the harvest had been done, that was the beginning of the year. And that can seem a bit strange, right? Again, in some other traditions, we would think that it's more the spring, that's the beginning of the year. However, in the Celtic tradition, and that's where our All Saints' Day comes from, that was the time when you enter the dark time. The dark time, of course, in the south hemisphere will be the opposite, as Linda would say, but still, there's always that more light and more dark. Even in the north, it's more or less long, but still you have that difference between night and day. So that's the beginning of the dark time where we have to release and go inward. So in a way, it's a breathing in, like nature, going deep into our abdomen to breathe in. And at the same time, it's breathing out, like I said before, in the leaves, in the sleep. All of nature is going to be sleepy until the spring. So the image that I thought we could use also, it's like nature is taking a deep breath in and letting go at the same time. And it's like nature is going into gestation, pregnancy. So for example, in the Celtic tradition, what they knew very well is that, and it comes in a way to a bit like in the Heart Sutra, no beginning, no end, no life, no death, because even though it is a death happening, it's a letting go happening, but deep down, what is actually working out is it's a preparation of spring in that depth. Like, plant your tree now, because then in the spring it will be strong. So that means, of course, that's a season that we need also to be strong in the spring. And the spring is usually a windy season, unstable season. And indeed, if the trees are not rooted enough, they might not be able to do well in the spring. So it's like going deep, deep inside is the way of nature to prepare for the big exhalation that will happen in the spring. So right now, it's breathing in deep. And in the spring, it breathes out deep and let everything go. So the fall is really the same movement as the lung in nature, the releasing, the breathing in. But the stronger breath is actually an in breath, an active, a nourishing breath that it's taking deep inside to be ready for the out breath of spring. So I think that's part of it. That there's no other season where that paradox of the lung, breathing in, breathing out, is as obvious as in the fall. In some traditions, they will separate, breathing in, breathing out. In the Taoist tradition, because they look at the compaction, at how life is formed, like the earth was formed by becoming cooler, becoming compact, and releasing the atmosphere. So the rocks, the metal energy in Chinese medicine means everything that is mineral. So crystals, rocks, all the minerals, everything that you find in the earth, that comes from that deep compaction over time, and all the cosmic events that happen to make those rocks and that compaction. And of course, it is also our birth and our death. Because you can say that we are also, the result of qi coming into us, the first breath into us, and matter, creating matter, and then at the end of life, releasing, breathing in, breathing out. And of course, the fall is particularly poignant in that way, in its nostalgia of evoking breathing and breathing in and breathing out. So that's the first thing for fall and lung. I mean, you all touched on different aspects. And why lung and sadness? Why is it the emotion linked to the lung and to the fall?
If you aren't able to breathe deeply, perhaps that is something that can trigger that type of emotion, or vice versa, where if you are feeling sad, down, or some other variation of emotion, you find your breath being shorter and your lung not expanding as deeply. Is that maybe?
Yeah. Where you are absolutely right, also, Linda, is that, body and mind are never separated. Emotions and body, we separate them when we talk, but they are all one. So yes, we can create sadness through our posture, through not breathing deeply. And indeed, like you said too, when we are sad, we don't breathe as deeply. And it's interesting to see how connected the fact of crying is linked to the lung too, right? It's not very elegant to cry, right? Your nose gets all stuffed up, and you get all red, and you have mucus coming out, and you need to blow your nose. And so it's obviously very connected to the lung. And yes, the way we breathe can create emotions, just like emotions are related to the body. Yeah.
I
Anything?
feel like
Yes.
it like it like makes it hard to like give or receive things. So it makes it hard to have that kind of exchange of like breathing in or breathing out, I guess. Like because you feel kind of disconnected from the cycle, the natural cycles of giving and receiving, maybe. I don't know.
And you mean when you're sad?
Yeah, like
Okay.
a disconnect from that flow.
Okay.
Also, to me, it occurred when you were talking that letting go, there's grief in letting go.
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 And that's why, I was mentioning that it's not a negative emotion in that tradition when you look at it, grief and actually fall is a good season to honor our grief. That's why it's also the season of ancestors. When we honor ancestors, there's a nostalgia that comes with the fact that fall is a descending energy. Spring is an upward energy. And of course, all human beings, we have a tendency to want the high and not the down, right? So going down into, and then of course, the emotion linked to winter is more fear. But there is that grief. And when we say grief and sorrow, it's all that in life that we need to let go of, the disillusions, the death of loved ones, of course, becoming old, letting go of youth, letting go of a relationship, letting go of dreams, and especially as we get older, but at all ages, we have to let go of some things we wanted and can't do. Or, of course, there's also right now the grief about what's happening in our environment, about, our oceans and trees and animals, the suffering. So it's, we can say that in the falling of the leaves, there is, in that letting go, indeed, there's a sense of grief and mourning of what was, and of course, the perspective of the autumn of our life and the perspective of death is there too. Because when we look at, like I look at the garden when the leaves are all dried up, of course, they will create the next soil. The flowers are no more. So there's that sense of, letting go and the grief that goes with that. So here too, it's not a bad emotion, because if we open to our own grief rather than ignore it or pretend it's not there, if we open to our own grief, of course, that's where we find compassion. We would not be able to feel compassion if we did not experience ourselves grief and sadness. So it's a good season, I think, to get into the spirit of the season. Also means respecting that aspect of grief. So it's honoring the ones who are no more. It can be a time also to continue. We mentioned that, I mentioned that last time I talked briefly about it. It's a good time also to review the relationships we had with the ones who are gone. Whether it's to write letters, whether it's a really good season for expressing sadness through poetry, through singing, through dreaming, and connecting with that part, the dark part. Because it is also like a time, because there's so much fog and that mist. Mist is always the symbol of the unknown, also the mysterious. So we're still faced with a mystery of life and death. However much, including now, however much we try to explain things, there's still this huge mystery of life and death. And so the mists invite us to get into that fog. And in old traditions, and Halloween is part of that, even though it's been changed and deformed, it's like it's also the time of magic, where you can meet the unknown, you can discover in the fog of your dreams, in the fog of things we don't like about ourselves, we can find jewels in there, the breath of life and death. So the fall is a good season that invites us to get in touch with that sadness of all the things we have needed to let go, will need to let go. And, everybody has known betrayals and disillusions and abandonments. All of that is part of that grief. So, and at the same time, it's not a pessimistic view of the fall, because again, you have within the fall already the spring is in there. And it's going deep into our roots to find strength and juice to be able to continue. So, and I was thinking that if you look at art, at human art, some of the most beautiful art on earth comes from deep grief. Music, poetry, that's often where in the grips of sadness we go further than ourselves and our mental agitation. And in Daoist traditions, you could say that the head is our south, the feet are our north, our abdomen is part of the north. So you could say that the fall and the winter invite us to go into our roots and cool off the fire, the mental illusion that we can create sometimes in the fire of our south heads, southern heads. Okay, so it's necessary to cool off and to go deep, just like that tree that is planted at the time of fall. So here too, I invite you, and you are in session, so what could be more related than that energy? I mean, it's just perfect. And I invite you to think of rituals that would be meaningful, because like you said, Tejo, it's a time of letting go. So, in the fields, they would make big bonfires of dead leaves and dead wood. And we can find ways of doing that ourselves. It's a good time to clean, a bit like you were saying before, also, oxygenation, of cleansing. So maybe burning things that we write. It could be writing to departed ones. It could take any form that we like, writing a poem, but it's a good time to honor the letting go and act out the letting go in rituals. And again, the All Saints' Day came from that in the Catholic tradition. That's what they took from that old tradition. And now it's not done so much, but certainly in France, not so long ago, again, not many people do that anymore, but they would take the chrysanthemums. They buy chrysanthemum everywhere around All Saints' Day. You see chrysanthemums, and people buy them because it's a flower of the fall that resists the cold and can live a long time in the cold, and would bring them to the tombs in the cemetery to put on the tombs of departed ones. When I was a young girl, I remember doing that with my parents, but then, I mean, first of all, you don't keep the land for a long time, and then did not renew the lease or whatever. And people don't do that anymore so much. But I think it's a good ritual to reinvent for ourselves. How can we honor and create rituals for our grief and sorrows? And the last question I had, why is dryness the pathogen of the lung? Wouldn't you think that it would rather be, humidity and let me just also clarify that just because the dryness is the pathogen of the lung, that doesn't mean that the lung is not affected by other pathogens, cold, humidity, but dryness is its particular one. Each organ has a particular pathogen it's sensitive to. No inspiration there. Literally inspiration. All right. Well, it's almost time, so I'm going to help out a bit. You've said it in many different ways, all of you. It's like, and in what we discuss is that, Tejo, you mentioned, becoming dry. And indeed, you can say nature is becoming dry, right? That's why the flowers are no more. That's why the leaves are losing their leaves. Everything goes inside, and we do too. So that's why many people do have dry skin, or maybe eczema that becomes more difficult in the fall and in the winter, because our blood goes deeper. And when we check the pulse, when we take the pulse, there's a pulse that corresponds to each season. And the pulse of the fall is indeed deeper in the fall and winter. It's more to the surface in the summer. It's more surging in the summer. So nature is drying up. It's taking everything inside. So it is regenerating its water deep inside, right? So the water tables are going to be renewed. The water that comes from the snow of the mountains is going to nourish the rivers. And so deep inside, there's a renewal of water. But on the surface, it's all drying up. So you can say that in Taoist tradition, each season will suffer from its own, from its own pathogen. Let me give you another example. In the summer, what do you think is the pathogen of the summer? Of the heart, I'm going to say the heart, because it's a season of the heart. What is the characteristic of summer? Yeah?
Heat.
Heat, right. So the pathogen of the heart is
Heat.
heat, right? There's already so much heat. It's already so heated up, it cannot take any more. So it needs the opposite. It needs to be cooled off, right? So it's the same thing in nature. Everything is drying up. So it has no room for dryness. And our lung needs to be spongious and wet, just like our brain. So if it gets too dry, and if our emotions get too dry, our lung and large intestine don't get nourished either. So each season has to be balanced by a different nature. So hydration is important for us. Just like hydration is important for nature, it will rain. There will be more rain toward the winter, maybe more snow. It needs to be wet because everything is drying up deep inside. So we need good hydration, and we need, so for example, something very simple, but lots of people do suffer from lung issues in the fall or in the winter because it's too dry in their environment, with the heater. So making sure there's, a bowl of water on the heater to moisturize the atmosphere is important. So each season needs some of its opposite to be healthy, basically. Voila. Are you all right with this little exercise?
Thank you.
Thank you to you. It came from you. That was from your questions. So just, as a finishing line, and you're in a good spot with Sesshin, how this tradition is really inviting us to go deep, deep into the spirit of the season, to adapt our food, to adapt our emotions, and to really align ourselves. And our organs correspond to that energy. So right now it's taking care of our lungs. Right? Okay. Voila. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna make some announcements. What is today? November 8th. Okay, so this Tuesday, the Zen Center of Asheville is having their Zazen and Dharma talk Tuesday evening, which is in person only. And the speaker is Jim Yakuzen Barnum. Next Saturday, I don't know that we have our speaker schedule ironed out for. Are you speaking?
Genjo.
Genjo is speaking.
What are you going? What's the title?
I'll get back to you.
TBA.
TBA.
Genjo is speaking about something next Saturday. All good. And then that Sunday, November 16th, there will be an intro to Zen class that's on Zoom only, Sunday morning. And that's what we have for the next week. Okay, let's get back to Merit.
Happy session.
May the merit of this practice
benefit all beings
benefit all beings
and bring peace.
and bring peace.
Thank you.
Thank you.